Chapter 8. Pippi entertains two burglars. After Pippi's performance at the circus, there was not a single person in that little town who did not know how strong she was. There was even a piece of paper in the news about her. But people who lived in other places, of course, didn't know who Pippi was. One dark autumn evening, two tramps came walking around past Villa Canula. They were two bad thieves wandering about the county to see who or what they could steal. They saw that there was a light in the windows of Villa Canula and decided to go in and ask for a sandwich. That evening, Pippi had poured out her gold pieces onto the kitchen floor and sat there counting them. To be sure, she couldn't count very well, but she did it now and then anyways, just to keep everything in order. 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 6010, 6011, 6012, 6013, 6016. Woo! It makes my throat feel 60. Goodness, there must be some numbers in arithmetic. Oh yes, now I remember. 104. 1,000. That certainly is a lot of money, said Pippi. There is a loud knock at the door. Walk in or stay out. Whichever you choose, shouted Pippi. I never force anyone against their will. The door opened and two tramps came in. You can imagine that they opened their eyes when they saw the little red-headed girl sitting all alone on the floor counting money. Are you all alone at home? They asked. Of course not, said Pippi. Mr. Nilsson is home too. The thieves couldn't very well know that Mr. Nilsson was a monkey sleeping in a green bed with a doll's quilt around his tummy. They thought the man of the house must be named Mr. Nilsson. They winked at each other. We can come back a little later, is what they meant. But to Pippi they said, we can just come and ask what your clock is. They were so excited that they had forgotten all about the sandwiches. Great! Strong men who don't know what a clock is, said Pippi. Where in the world were you brought up? The clock is the little round thingamajig that says tick-tack, tick-tack, and that goes and goes and never gets to the door. Do you know any more riddles? Out of them, if you do, said Pippi. The tramps thought Pippi was too little to tell time, so without another word, they went out again. I don't demand you say tack, thanks in Swedish, shouted Pippi after them, but you could at least make an effort to say tick. You haven't even as much sense as a clock has. But by all means go in peace, and Pippi went back to her counting. No sooner were the tramps outside than they began to rub their hands in delight. Did you see all that money? Heavenly days, said one of them. Yes, once in a while, luck is with us, said the other. All we need to do is wait until the kid and Mr. Nilsson are asleep. Then we'll sneak in and grab the dough. They sat down under the oak tree in the garden to wait. A drizzling rain was falling. They were very hungry, so they were quite uncomfortable, but the thought of all the monkeys kept their spirits up. From time to time, the lights went out in other houses, but in Villa Canula they shone on. It so happened that Pippi was learning to dance, and she didn't want to go to bed until she was sure she could do it. At last, however, the lights went out in the windows of Villa Canula too. The tramps waited quiet until they were sure Mr. Nilsson would have gone to sleep. At last they crept quietly up the kitchen door and prepared to open it with their burglary tools. Meanwhile, one of them, his name, as a matter of fact, was Bloom, just happened to feel the doorknob. The door was not locked. Well, some people are smart, he whispered to his companion. The door is open. So much better for us, answered the companion, a black-haired man called Thunder Carlson. By those who knew him, Thunder Carlson turned on his pocket flashlight and they crept into the kitchen. There was no one there. In the next room was Pippi's bed, and there also stood Mr. Nilsson's little doll bed. Thunder Carlson opened the door and looked around carefully. Everything was quiet as he played his flashlight around the room. When the light touched Pippi's bed, The two tramps were amazed to see nothing but a pair of feet on the pillow. Pippi, as usual, had her head under the covers and her feet on the top of the bed. "That must be the girl," whispered Thunder Carlson to Bloom. "And no doubt she sleeps soundly. But where in the world is Nilsson, do you suppose?" "Mr. Nilsson, if you please," came Pippi's calm voice from under the covers. "Mr. Nilsson is in the little green doll bed." The tramps were so startled that they almost rushed out at once, but then it suddenly dawned on them that Pippi had said Mr. Nilsson was lying in the doll's bed. And now in the light of the flashlight, they could see a little bed and a little tiny monkey lying in it. Thunder Bloom couldn't help laughing. "Bloom," he said, "Mr. Nilsson is a monkey. Can you beat that?" "Well, what did you think he was?" came Pippi's calm voice from under the covers again. "A lawnmower?" "Aren't your mother and father home?" asked Bloom. "No," said Pippi. "They're gone, completely gone." Thunder Carlson and Bloom chuckled in delight. "Listen, little girl," said. "Come out so we can talk to you." "No, I'm sleeping," said Pippi. "So, is it more riddles you want? If so, answer this one. What is that goes and goes and never gets to the door?" Now Bloom went over and pulled the covers off of Pippi. "Can you dance the schottische?" asked Pippi, looking him gravely in the eyes. "I can." "You ask too many questions," said Thunder Carlson. "Can we ask you a few too?" "Where, for instance, is that money you had on the floor a little while ago?" "In the suitcase on top of the wardrobe," answered Pippi truthfully. Thunder Carlson and Bloom grinned. "I hope you don't have anything against our taking it, our little friend," said Thunder Carlson. "Certainly not," said Pippi. "Of course I don't." Whereupon Bloom lifted down the suitcase. "I hope you don't have anything against my taking it back, little friend," said Pippi, getting out of bed and stepping over to Bloom. Bloom had no idea how it all happened, but suddenly the suitcase was in Pippi's hands. "Here, quit your fooling," said Thunder Carlson. "Hand over the suitcase." He took Pippi firmly by the hand and tried to snatch it back. "Fooling, fooling, too much fooling," said Pippi, and lifted Thunder Carlson up on the wardrobe. A moment later, she had Bloom up there too. Then the tramps were frightened. They began to see that Pippi was no ordinary girl. However, the suitcase tempted them so much that they forgot their fright. "Come on now, both together," yelled Thunder Carlson, and they jumped down from the wardrobe and threw themselves on Pippi, who had the suitcase in her hand. Pippi gave each one a little poke with her finger, and they shrank away into the corner. Before they had a chance to get up again, Pippi had fetched a rope as quick as a flash and had bound their arms and legs of both burglars. Now they sang a different tune. "Please, please, miss," begged Thunder Carlson. "Forgive us. We were only joking. Don't hurt us. We're just two tramps who came in to ask for food." Bloom even began to cry a bit. Pippi put the suitcase neatly back in the wardrobe. Then she turned to her prisoners. "Can either of you dance the schottische?" "Why, yes," said Thunder Carlson. "I guess we both can." "Oh, what fun!" cried Pippi, clapping her hands. Can't we dance a little? I've just learned, you know." "Well, certainly, by all means," said Thunder Carlson, a bit confused. Pippi took some large scissors and cut the ropes that bound her guests. "But we don't have any music," she said in a worried voice. Then she had an idea. "Can't you blow on a comb?" she said to Bloom. "I'll dance with him." She pointed to Thunder Carlson. Oh yes, Bloom could blow on a comb all right, and blow he did, so that he could hear it all through the house. Mr. Nilsson sat up in his bed wide awake just in time to see Pippi whirling around with Thunder Carlson. She was dead serious and danced as if her life depended on it. At last Bloom said he couldn't blow on the comb any longer because it tickled his mouth unmercifully. And Thunder Carlson, who had tramped the roads all day, began to feel tired. "Oh, please, just a little longer," begged Pippi, dancing on, and Bloom and Thunder Carlson couldn't do nothing but continue. At 3 a.m, Pippi said, "Keep on dancing until Thursday, and maybe you're tired and hungry." And here's the picture of them dancing. That was exactly what they were. Though they hardly dared to say so, Pippi went to the pantry and took out bread and cheese, and butter, ham, and cold roast and milk. And they sat around the kitchen table, Bloom, Thunder Carlson, and Pippi, and they ate until they were almost four-cornered. Pippi poured a little milk into her ear. "That's good for earache," she said. "Poor thing." "Have you gotten an earache?" asked Bloom. "No," said Pippi. I might get one." Finally, the two tramps got up, thanked Pippi for all the food, and begged to allow her to say goodbye. "It was awfully joyful that you came. Do you really have to go so soon?" Pippi said regretfully. "Never have I seen anyone who can dance this scocious the way you do, my sugar pig," she said to Thunder Carlson, and to Bloom. "If you keep on practicing on the comb, you won't notice the tickling." As they were going out the door, Pippi came running after them and gave them each a gold piece. These were honestly earned," she said.